Hello and welcome back to the Life in the Wrist podcast. Today is a mega episode covering all of the releases or some of the most notable releases from Watches and Wonders this year. If you didn't know, this past week in Geneva was Watches and Wonders, where brands from all over showcase the watches that they have produced for that given year. There are some really cool releases, and I'm going to go through some of the ones that sort of caught my eye. There was another topic that I wanted to discuss, but you'll have to wait for next week's episode. What we'll likely do next week is do a little bit of auction coverage, as there are some auctions that are taking place this month, and so I want to cover some of the cool lots that are being offered up in those auctions. So to kick off this episode, where we are covering the Watches and Wonders releases, I thought I would start off with one of the releases from Bulgari, which is the thinnest tourbillon in the world. And I mean, it seems like this is a continuous sort of accolade that Bulgari is sort of continuing to develop and continue to sort of pursue. The house has released the Octofinissimo Ultra Tourbillon, which is now the world's thinnest tourbillon watch. The watch itself is incredibly revolutionary. Bulgari over multiple years now has set 10 world records with the Octofinissimo collection and developed 13 revolutionary movements in just 11 years. I think this really shows what the goals of the brand are. They also were included in many of the GPHG awards. They won in 2021 for its Octofinissimo Perpetual Calendar, which was the slimmest self-winding perpetual calendar in the world. This watch, the Octofinissimo Ultra Tourbillon, as I mentioned, is now officially the world's thinnest tourbillon watch, and it measures 1.85 millimeters in thickness. This is a sort of a constant battle between Bulgari and Piaget with the Altiplano Ultimate Concept Tourbillon, and that was 2 millimeters, and so Bulgari has knocked off another 15 millimeters to that measurement. The watch is 40 millimeters with a titanium case, and it has an incredible movement, the manual wound BV F900 caliber, which has 42 hours of power reserve, and really the case integrates into the base plate of the movement, to be able to see pictures of this watch is really what is so incredibly astonishing. I think some of the close-ups that you can see, as always, there will be links in the show notes to this podcast so you can see it, but seeing some of the close-ups of the watch, you realize how thin the actual watch is and the components, how thin the components are. The article that I'll be linking to also has a really cool picture of the mainspring, which is also just incredibly thin. I think what's quite cool is when you turn the watch over, it has a really interesting sort of skeletonized back of the watch where you can actually see a lot more of the components. This watch is limited to 20 units and is an incredible accolade for Bulgari as a brand. We'll have to see what Piaget does in the next year, if they are going to sort of fight back and come out with something maybe at 1.55 millimeters. We'll have to see how it goes. Bulgari also released a new Serpenti Eterna, which is a really beautiful looking sort of jewelry piece from them, and develops on the sort of iconic Serpenti design, where it's sort of integration of a watch and a bracelet. Really beautiful pieces, quartz movements, but they did release some mechanical movements for the Serpenti line. It is quite interesting that they decided not to put that in this watch, but hey, I'm glad at least that they did that. So we'll wrap up with Bulgaria. We'll move on to a brand that I'm sure everyone wants to know, and that's the Patek Philippe. And this Watches and Wonders, they released a bunch of really interesting watches. One of the pieces, the 5308, is the quadruple complication reference, and this piece that they have released is one of their obviously high-end complicated watches that they released, and this is a 42 millimeter white gold cased instantaneous perpetual calendar chronograph, and this sort of replaces the 5208, which was in their current collection. Really beautiful split second chronograph, really nice sort of ice blue is how I would probably describe it. Dial. And then a really beautiful new caliber, the RCHR27 PSQI caliber. Very, very attractive, and finished to the nth degree, being Patek Philippe. One of my favorite releases is one of the recent releases that they had this year was the 5370R, which is a split second chronograph manufactured by the brand. The latest iteration of that this reference first debuted in 2015, and the latest iteration of it was a platinum blue dial version of this watch that was from 2020. And this version that they've come out with has a really beautiful rose gold case. And one of the things that I really love about this watch is also the dial, which has this sort of a chocolate brown. It's a two-tone dial, so you've got sort of a creamy outside around the dial, and then you've got the center, which has a nice sort of chocolate brown color, and then really nice numerals for the hour markers. Flipping this watch over is another thing the dial is actually Grandfeu enamel dial, which is brown with sort of the beige Champlevé enamel subdials, and then the sort of creamy tones are where the tachymeter are located. When you flip this watch over, it's really where things are incredibly beautiful. It runs in the caliber CHR 29-535 PS movement, which is a manual wound two-phase chronograph that currently carries 7 patented features. And obviously you have the split-second function that is controlled with the pusher that's integrated into the crown. So reminiscent of a lot of the split-second chronographs that Patek Philippe made sort of during their history, and a really beautiful example in sort of a modern look. I'm going to skip some of the pieces that kind of just didn't really interest me. One of the pieces that really did interest me, though, was the Calatrava 8-day reference 5328 that they have come out with. This is a really beautiful 8-day Power Reserve Calatrava that they released, and there's also instantaneous date and day displays at 6 o'clock on this watch, and then you also have, I think, a Power Reserve indicator just below where 12 o'clock is located. It's really cool that this is an 8-day Power Reserve piece, especially given the fact that this is a manual wind watch. This is the movement that they have newly released is the caliber 31505, and then there's a bunch of other things after that, but to keep it fairly simple, the movement actually features the Pulso Max escapement with Silinvar components, which is technology originally developed through Patek Philippe's advanced research program. It has dual barrels that work in tandem to deliver this power reserve, and there's obviously the red indication appearing on the 9th day to remind you when to wind it on the top of the dial. I really love this piece because when you flip this watch over, the 31505 movement is a really beautifully manufactured movement. The bridges of the watch really remind me of vintage Patek Philippe pocket watch movements, and finished really, really beautifully with Geneva stripes and really beautiful. It's really, really beautifully done, and I'm glad that they actually allowed for a display case back on this Calatrava watch, because it's a lovely thing to look at. And to be honest, this is probably one of my favorite releases from Patek Philippe. Patek also released the reference 6169P, which is a platinum fresh iteration of the 5196 sort of inspired piece. It's 38 millimeters in diameter, so it fits really nicely in sort of today's sort of sizes. A really beautiful Calatrava that they released. They released a ton of other pieces. I'm not going to cover all of them. The next thing I'll talk about those, the Cubitus, so the reference 7128. This was debuted last October and was obviously a pretty interesting release, where there were people who loved it and people who hated it. The actual watch that they released in October, I think, was something like 42 or 44 millimeters, and this version that they have released is a 40 millimeter in diameter watch. So quite an interesting move to sort of shrink down the size, but I think it also allows for more people to possibly be interested in these in this watch. So some really interesting releases. They also released a desk clock, reference 27000M, which is inspired obviously by the sort of 1920s incredible 31-day power reserve desk clocks. This is a really beautiful example, and I encourage you to check out the pictures. Moving on to probably one of the standouts from Watches and Wonders, and that was Cartier. One of the biggest things that they released was the Cartier Privé Tank à guichet, which is a really beautiful jumping hour tank style watch. And obviously they produced these in the 1920s. Tank guichets were really well renowned in sort of the vintage watch space, and it's really cool that they came out with this sort of modern version. The pieces are 37 millimeters tall, which is quite a wearable size in sort of this fairly traditionally styled piece. There's three versions: yellow gold, rose gold, and in platinum. And you obviously have your hour indicator, your hour jumping hour aperture at 12 o'clock, and then you've got your minutes that are sort of in a display or aperture towards where 6 o'clock would traditionally be. There is a really cool version which is limited to 200 pieces, and instead of displaying the time sort of 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock where you have those, what they've done is basically rotated the apertures 90 degrees to sort of make it a little bit offset, and is quite a nice looking piece. The case is in platinum, and as I mentioned, is limited to 200 pieces. They also released a Cartier Tank Louis Cartier, which is a 38 millimeter tank watch. Really beautiful, sort of traditional piece from them. Roman numerals, blued sword hands. Really attractive looking piece. And then they also came out with some more jewelry, design pieces. Sort of ladies watches. They also came out with Cartier Panther, which is quite a cool watch, and then they also came up with some bangles that sort of are inspired by the very traditional, or not very traditional, but very rare vintage bangle watches that Cartier has produced in its history. The only thing that I would say is kind of disappointing is that they released it with a quartz movement. It would be great if they used some of their incredible movements that they've produced, or mechanical movements in these pieces. So unfortunately, didn't have that, but nevertheless, a cool release. Vacheron Constantin is a brand that I absolutely love. I'll talk about two of the really important pieces in my mind that they have released that I really like. But they did come out with a ton of different pieces. They came out with a traditional tourbillon perpetual calendar, which is quite attractive. I've always found that some of the proportions of these watches, or some of the complicated pieces from Vacheron Constantin in recent history, proportions just haven't sort of fit my aesthetics, but I think they really did well with these. They also came out with a trio of platinum traditional open face limited edition pieces, each really, really beautiful examples of perpetual calendars. They've got a beautiful open work sort of dial where you can see the movement. They've also got really cool, where you have your in your perpetual calendar, where you have the day of the week and the month that you're in. They made those essentially see-through, so you can actually have quite a cool look down into the dial of these watches. Flipping them over, really beautiful, very traditional automatic movement from Vacheron Constantin. And being the 270th anniversary of the brand, they have a cool little stamp of the Vacheron Constantin logo with 270 written throughout it. Movements are really beautiful, platinum cases, hand guilloché white gold dials that are inspired by the Maltese cross, obviously the logo of the brand. So quite nice. They also came out with, and these are obviously limited editions. So the complete calendar open face is limited to 370 pieces. Then you have the traditional perpetual calendar retrograde date open face. So very similar characteristics of the dial, and that is also limited to 370 pieces. And then you have the traditional tourbillon retrograde date open face. That is also limited to 370 pieces. For me, one of my favorite releases, and I think it's just because I prefer simplistic watches maybe, was the traditional, the Patrimony that they came out with, which is a 38 millimeter time only piece from Vacheron Constantin. They came out with, obviously limited to 370 pieces, but they have 370 of these traditionals in the Patrimony traditional in platinum, and then in pink gold. When you turn the watch over, really beautiful caliber 4400 from Vacheron Constantin, beautifully finished. And again, you have that sort of Maltese cross with a 270 number inside of it to celebrate that milestone. They also came out with a traditional moon phase, which is a 36 millimeter moon phase piece with some really nicely set diamonds, and also a traditional manual wine that is in 33 millimeters that I think are obviously catering a little bit more to the lady Patek Philippe, Vacheron Constantin collectors. They also came out with the Patrimony moon phase retrograde date and the Patrimony self-winding, both in white and pink gold, limited to 370 pieces, again with the Maltese cross sort of aesthetics on the dial of these pieces in celebration of the 270th anniversary. One of the pieces the lines of watches that I really enjoyed seeing was the Le Cabinotier tribute to the Tour de Lille, which is a incredible trio of limited edition pieces that are time only, 40 millimeters, and each of them have an enamel dial that depicts the Tour de Lille, which is inspired by a historic lithograph and reinterpreted by Vacheron Constantin designers. And the tower once you'll see on the dials of these watches, was once where the Vacheron Constantin workshop was located in the mid-19th century. So paying tribute to a very important building in Geneva, but also to Vacheron Constantin as a brand. What's really nice is the watches also have an officer style case back with each of them with Geneva's motto, which is inscribed on the inside of the officer's case back. The first model is in platinum and features the Grand Fear enamel painted dial in pastel shades. And then, which probably is the most vibrant in color, I would say. You then have a platinum piece that has that combines a hand-executed guilloche with a Grand Fer enamel. And this one has sort of tones of sort of gold, and then you've got these reds where the clock is located in the tower. And then the last one is in pink gold, and it has a really beautiful freehand engraving of a very similar depiction of this. So you really are getting in this in these in this lineup of watches important finishing that Vacheron Constantin has mastered over many years, and an important depiction of a place that's really close to the Vacheron Constantin brand. The last watch from Vacheron Constantin that I wanted to mention is the De Cabanotier Solaria Ultra Grand Complication, which has, is the world's most complicated wristwatch, because now it has 41 complications that are set into this watch. It's an incredible display of watchmaking, and the amount of complications that are pressed into this one piece are incredible. This is obviously again in celebration of the 270th anniversary of the brand, and if you want to know about complications, check this one out, because it's really, really beautiful. The movement that it's running on is the caliber 3655. You probably know that Vacheron Constantin released the 57260 and the Berkeley Grand Complication, which had a team of 3 watchmakers over 8 years work on this. The Solaria was conceived and developed by actually one individual named Jean-Marie Bouquin, who also was behind the highly complicated Celestia in 2017. And basically over the course of 8 years, he single-handedly designed both the movement and the case. And with a as I mentioned, record-setting 41 complications, this caliber, the 3655, consists of 1,521 components and 204 jewels. And there are no fewer than 13 patents that that cover this watch. Incredible power reserve too of 72 hours. The time and energy it probably took to make this movement is mind-blowing. And I think, again, is an example of why I love Vacheron Constantin, because they push the boundaries of what's technically possible when manufacturing watches, and I think that's just so cool. So to give you an idea, you have 6 time measurement complications. You have a Gregorian perpetual calendar, which has 8 complications. You have lunar indications, which there are 3. Then you have astronomical indications, which there are 14. And then you have chiming complications, including a minute repeater, but it's only one of the 5 that are there. And then you have your split-second chronograph, which has 4. It's a single-piece edition, obviously, and is a wonderful release and a great way to celebrate the 270th anniversary with something complicated and obviously world record setting. All right, one of the big releases obviously was from Rolex. I'm sure you have been waiting for me to discuss this. They released the Rolex Land Dweller, which has a new escapement and an integrated bracelet, and there's many sort of opinions on how this is sort of shaken out. To give you an idea of the watch, to kind of describe it to you, what they essentially have done is they've taken what was the design of the oyster quartz, or if you know the oyster quartz that Rolex had released, where it's got this really interesting sort of sporty style case. They basically took the oyster quartz case and they integrated a bracelet into that with quite interesting link design. It's not their fluted bezel or oyster bracelet. It's or not fluted bezel. Excuse me. It's not their oyster bracelet or their Jubilee bracelet. It's kind of a completely newly designed bracelet specific for this. The dial has also got a really interesting sort of finishing to it, where you've got these shaped dials, shapes throughout the dial of the watch, and then you've got a date complication at 3 o'clock, very similar to the date just, but you do have a newly designed hands that have never really been seen before on a Rolex watch, and then you've got a fluted bezel on this. There's a couple of versions of these pieces. There's a I believe it's white gold with a blue dial, like a light blue dial, and then you've got I believe a yellow gold. I want to say yellow gold. Is this yellow gold? Maybe it's rose gold, with a white dial and sort of diamonds on the bezel, and then the same sort of version, the same sort of version, but in steel, with a white dial and obviously fluted bezel. So this was a controversial release. I forgot to mention, the movement of this watch is quite interesting. They have a display case back which allows you to see the Land Dweller's caliber 7135 movement, which is quite an attractive thing to see. It's kind of cool that Rolex is sort of opening the case backs for one to actually see what they're producing. So kind of a cool design there. This watch obviously was very controversial. I think many people either loved it or hated it, as happens with most watches. I think it's cool that they're using the oyster quartz case. I think it's a really nice design, and is also reminiscent of a lot of Omega watches that were released during the history of Omega. So that's a kind of a cool feature. I'd say the redesign of the hands, the redesign of the bracelets are probably more controversial. Many people criticize Rolex because they don't change things up very quickly, but when they do, then they get a lot of criticism for it. So it's a catch-22. Sort of, you can't win with any of it. But let me know what you think about these the Land Dweller. I got a ton of messages on Instagram about this piece, so I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. Rolex also released the Rolex Perpetual 1908 in yellow gold on a bracelet, which is quite cool. The bracelet is reminiscent to me. Let me actually read what they basically debuted this newly developed, fully polished 7-link Settimo bracelet with in 18 karat yellow gold. That obviously makes this watch a little bit more dressy. The watch obviously is 39 millimeters in diameter and houses the in-house caliber 7140, which there is a display case back to be able to see it, and is a very, very attractive. I think the bracelet is quite interesting, quite an interesting addition to this watch, and obviously gives it a little bit more of a dressy feel. I'm not a huge fan of the 1908. It's just not my aesthetic, but it's nice that Rolex can actually offer this with the bracelets as well. All right. Moving forward, H. Moser came out with the Streamliner Flyback Chronograph Automatic Frozen. I've always been a fan of the Streamliner. I've covered it extensively on Life on the Wrist. What's cool about these pieces is they came out with this flyback chronograph movement and a really cool sort of starry frozen dial that I think is quite attractive to look at. The movement when you flip the watch over is also extremely attractive to look at. But speaking of the dials, so basically what they did was they created the sort of this frosted finish using fume. That to me it looks like basically like a sky full of stars is how I see it. But quite an attractive look for these pieces, and the flyback movement is unbelievably, the amount of depth that you have in the construction of this movement is incredible. It's the caliber HMC 907. And I really like the mixture of sort of like steel and sort of black steel finishing. They've also obviously got, Geneva stripes and all that on this piece. So quite cool. There's a rose gold version. The rose gold version has the blue, like a blue dial, and then the steel version has a green dial. Lastly, I will cover IWC. So they expanded their Ingenieur line of watches with rose gold ceramic and a perpetual calendar Ingenieur. The ceramic version of this watch obviously is black, and then it has this black checkered pattern to it. I think what they're trying to do is basically offer people who are looking for sports watches some alternative to sort of a very basic steel or white gold Ingenieur. The rose gold version is also quite nice. It uses the same black dial that you'll find in the ceramic piece, dated 3 o'clock, but obviously rose gold and black dials look a little bit different. And then the last one that I think is really, really cool is they came out with the perpetual calendar in an Ingenieur case, and I think that is for me like really them sort of stepping up their game. It's a 42 millimeter steel case perpetual calendar with a really nice blue dial. A lot of times perpetual calendars the proportions can be off with the dials, but I think they really did nicely just based off of the pictures. Blue dial, really nice perpetual calendar configuration. And I think it will be a very popular piece. If you think about the overseas with the perpetual calendar, or the Royal Oak with the perpetual calendar, this is something that will obviously compete with those. And what's also nice is they have a display case back for the movement, so you can actually see the movement of these watches. I think is a really nice taste, and I think will do well. I think this will be something that will compete nicely with the other perpetual calendars or sports watches out there. I know I sort of rushed through this. I apologize in advance. There's just so much to talk about, and I encourage you to check the show notes so you can see the pictures and read the articles about these watches, because the coverage has been really great, and I want to make sure that you can see it. You probably have seen all these watches on Instagram throughout this week, but I hope you enjoy hearing my thoughts about it. With that said, I think we'll wrap up this episode of the Life in the Wrist podcast. If you are new to the podcast, be sure to follow us. And if you wouldn't mind sharing this podcast with a friend who might be interested in watches or might be interested in one of the pieces from Watches and Wonders this year, it really does help us out. It helps this podcast get to those who might find the channel interesting. So I really appreciate all the support that you can give the podcast. Let me know what you think about these releases, and if I missed something that you think was groundbreaking, be sure to send us a message on lifeinthewrist.com, or you can check out our social medias in the show notes of this podcast, and you can send us a message there. If you are feeling generous, and last but not least, if you are feeling generous and you wouldn't mind rating this podcast, it really does help the podcast out. It gets pushed to those who might be interested in things that you are interested in as well. And continues and ensures the future of the podcast. So would really appreciate a rating. With that said, guys, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Life in the Wrist podcast. I hope you have a great rest of your week, and we will see you in the next one.